Welcome back, everyone, to the Cigar Smoke-Filled Back Room. I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com. If you are a pro-gun Republican and you are looking for political consulting help, drop me a line at that email address. If you are not a pro-gun Republican, I guess I'll paraphrase, I got 99 problems, but you ain't one of them. All right, in today's installment of the video series of things that are not discussed enough in politics, or at least not discussed honestly enough in politics, we're going to talk about peer group shift. And before anybody asks, the cigar of the day is a Grey Cliff cigar, a G2. And the bottle of the day, which I cannot hide in this landscape format, is Tin Cup. This is their 10-year bourbon, which has this nice, strange little bottle cap, tin cup kind of thing. Kind of cute. Again, not sponsors to the program or anything, but hey, if they drop me a line, work something out. Anyway, let's talk about peer group shift. Have you ever noticed that when you elect someone to office, they very, very rarely, if ever, get more conservative when they're in office? Sometimes they don't change, but a lot of times they become more liberal. They become more moderate. Very rarely do you see Democrats go against the grain of their own party and become more centrist or conservative. But quite often, you see conservatives, I'm a pro-gun Republican, that go and get into office, and a few years down the road, maybe more, maybe many years, maybe decades down the road, but eventually at some point, not all of them, clearly, not all, but some of them, and too many of them, I would say, become more centrist or even liberal in their philosophical, political approach. Why is that? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that happens. Part of it, the most obvious part, and the part that is often cited, is a desire to stay in power. The old Potomac fever, right? They perceive that in order to stay in power, they have to be agreeable. And they want to be seen as, reaching across the aisle and so forth and so on. But that doesn't necessarily explain it all. Because if that was the thing, and look, people on my side of the aisle love to say this about our conservative Republican friends that go to Congress or go to the State House and suddenly get weak in the knees. We say, oh, see, they're just in it to stay in power. That's all they are. But if that were true, you would see Democrats getting moderate and squishy just as often as Republicans. And that doesn't happen. So yes, a desire to stay in power is part of it, but it's not all of it. What else is possible to explain this phenomenon? Well, part of it is also learning how things really work. You campaign on, let's say, well, I'm going to fire all these redundant, useless government employees. And look, it's a great talking point. And it's maybe even something that needs to be done, depending on what agency we're talking about and what the reason is. But you get to the seat of power, the State House, the U.S. Congress, whatever, and suddenly you discover that making reality conform to what you campaigned on is a whole lot harder than just, bashing your fist on the podium when you're out there on the campaign trail. Firing government employees is surprisingly difficult. Talking about firing government employees, that's very, very easy. So it could be that the person didn't change at all. It's just they were saying what they thought you needed to hear. They were kind of fibbing to you a little bit before. And then they get there and they say, we really can't do it quite like that. Oh, well, I guess we'll let that. And people, oh, hey, look at him. He got weak in the knees. He's getting soft. He's getting centrist. Yeah, maybe he always was, and he was just kind of snowing you a little bit on the campaign trail, right? But again, there's more to it than that. Because if that were the case, look, lots of Democrats run around and say stupid, silly things like, we should end all fossil fuels, right? Or we're going to confiscate all your firearms. Nay, ain't. But regardless, they say things like that on the campaign trail, right? And then they get there, of course, it's a little bit harder than that. And there is some of that happens on the left, too. So maybe there's some more validity to that one. But again, I think we need to dig a little deeper. And part of this is that when they get to the seat of power and they start to socialize with people in that seat of power, they experience peer group shift. And that is the focus of this video. See, we're humans, elected officials too. Sometimes maybe you feel like they shouldn't be classified as human. They are. They're human beings just like you, just like me. Human beings are social animals. We don't want to be hated. We want to be accepted. We want to be liked. We want to be valued. Everybody, okay? And if you don't want those things, there's probably something really, really, really profoundly wrong with you that you might need professional help with. But that's not my field. I'm a chemical engineer by degree. Most people want to be liked, or at least not hated. Now, when you go to that seat of power, seats of power, at least in today's American politics, tend to be more liberal than the nation or the state as a whole. And this is part of the problem. Now, I mentioned that this tends to happen over time. You see this not just with Congress critters and senators, whatever, or your state reps or whatever. It's also with the judiciary, right? A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, somebody gets on the Supreme Court, which is a lifetime appointment. They're not an elected official. They're appointed and confirmed, nominated and confirmed to that appointment on the Supreme Court. And the longer they stay on that court, the more moderate or liberal they become. I've never yet seen a liberal appointee become conservative, but I've seen conservative appointees become wishy-washy or even liberal, okay? So it's not entirely about trying to win the next election, because these Supreme Court justices don't have to win elections. They have a lifetime appointment, so it's not that. It's not the how things really work things with them either. Clearly, right? If they're up for the Supreme Court, they've probably been, a pretty big shot in the legal community already. They know how the things work. It ain't that. It's about peer group shift. But there is an age factor involved here. Because like I said, let's take these lifetime appointees. It is very normal. And look, getting into Congress or the U.S. Senate can effectively be a lifetime appointment, even though, yes, there's elections. But as we've discussed, incumbents have inherent advantages to get elected again. Okay, what happens as people age? Well, as people age, it is very normal for them to become more conservative. Young people tend to be more liberal than the population as a whole. Older people tend to be more conservative than the population as a whole. Very, very normal as you go through life for your political center, where you're rooted, to migrate towards the conservative position. So if that's true, why do we never see any liberals at the federal judiciary suddenly becoming conservative as they get into their 60s and 70s? Doesn't happen, does it? And even with Congress folk, doesn't happen, does it? And they're there for decades sometimes. Daniel Inouye is a former senator from Hawaii, Democrat. Did he become more conservative as he got older? Certainly not. Howard Metzenbaum, here from my own state of Ohio, Democrat, was in the Senate for a very long time. Did he become more conservative as he got older? Absolutely not. Why is that? Why is it that these people seem to buck the trend that as you get older, you tend to get more conservative? I believe the answer is pure group shift. When you move to the seat of power, you start to surround yourself with a subset of society that is different from your constituents back home. This is important, and there's a bunch of ways that this impacts you. It's the people that you see at work. Now, to a certain degree, if you are, you hire your own staff or whatever, you can select for a staff that agrees with you politically. That's part of it. But of course, you're not only seeing the people that you agree with. If you are in Congress, let's say, you're from a place like where I am, a rural county in Ohio, you're used to being in a place where 2 out of every 3 people is a Republican. It's as simple as that, right? Everywhere you go, whether it's business or social or just, incidental contacts, 2 out of 3 likelihood you're talking to a Republican. You go to Congress, which right now is essentially a 50-50 split, that is a much higher percentage of Democrats than you are used to dealing with. This is weird. This is different, right? So you're interacting more with people of a different persuasion. But again, that doesn't explain everything, because if that were true, then you would also have Democrats from very, very Democrat, very blue districts who, when they got to Congress, would be like, oh boy, gee, there's more Republicans around here. I wonder maybe if, I should challenge some of my beliefs. And they seem to magically not do that, right? So it's more than just the, representation, the makeup of the legislative body or what have you. No, there's more to it than that. These centers of power, these seats of power like Washington, like your state capital, tend to be in urban blue places. Washington, D.C. is vastly more liberal than America as a whole. Vastly more liberal even than many liberal states. It's just how things are right now, and have been for the past many decades. Here in my home state of Ohio, Columbus is our capital. Columbus is significantly bluer inside that I-270 beltway than the rest of the state of Ohio as a whole. Ohio is a center-right state. The city of Columbus is not center-right. It is left. It is blue, like a Smurf, okay? And that makes a difference, because now, once you've moved to that seat of power and you're living there, who do you see when you socialize, when you go to the club, when you go out to dinner, etc., right? When you socialize, you are surrounded by more liberal people. Certainly true in Washington, D.C., even here in our state capital, Columbus, and in most state capitals. They are more liberal than the state as a whole. Washington, D.C. is definitely more liberal than the country as a whole. You are interacting and socializing, and remember, we're social creatures, with a higher percentage of liberal people. That's part of it. And even who you see incidentally, or you're at, you stop for gas, and you're pumping your gas, and you hear a couple people talking in the next pump over, and they're complaining about, did you see what dumb thing Rand Paul did? Yeah, I like Rand Paul for the record personally. But, in Washington, D.C., I'm willing to wager he's not very well liked, right? My own Republican senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, not very well liked by the average denizen of D.C., right? Because they're very liberal, and J.D. Vance is not. And so, you hear these things. It's not even intentional. It's just, part of your day-to-day, right? You go to get your coffee. The person pouring your coffee is a full-blown flaming leftist, right? This is just incidental contacts, but they add up because we are social creatures, and we don't want to be hated. We don't want to be excluded. We don't want to be excoriated. We want to be liked and accepted and part of the group. And so we start to think, it may not even be conscious, maybe subconscious, that I need to be more like everybody I'm around, right? Rather than the way I was before. These are very deep-seated, like I say, psychological human things. But of course, there's more to it even than that. If you are in an elected office, not a lifetime appointee like a Supreme Court justice, let's say you're running for Congress, you are a congressman now. You got to win the next election, right? Okay, who are you going to surround yourself with? You're going to surround yourself with politicos, right? Politicos, political operatives who are interested in you succeeding. People who like that seat of power, right? They may be a Republican political operative, but they like that seat of power. They like being in that place that happens to be chock full of liberals. You're going to surround yourself with the donors who want you to succeed, who want you to get back into that office so that they can have access to you, right? And they want you to succeed, and they tend to hang out in these very same liberal power centers. So even if, yes, they're conservative donors, they are still conservative donors that understand the importance of that power center and that power structure and want to help make it move and want you to help make it move on their behalf. But guess what? It still has an influence. And then, of course, there's the ultimate. Whoever you are, you're not going to stay in office forever. And you have to plan for what comes after your term in office. And for a lot of politicians, that means their retirement plan includes becoming a lobbyist. And in order to be a lobbyist, you have to be at least tolerated by the power structure. That liberal blue is a Smurf power structure, right? So in order to be, considered and get access to the places you need access to, get the ears of the people you need to get the ears of to be an effective lobbyist, you have to play the game the way that the liberal power center expects it to be played. And that's your retirement plan. Think about what would happen if somebody told you, hey, you're not going to get your 401k unless you start, belting out the Star-Spangled Banner every day at noon sharp. I guarantee you'd be tuning up your vocal cords at 11:55 so you get your retirement, right? Same thing with politicians. They want to be a lobbyist when they get out of office. They got to play the game. They got to make sure they're at least not hated by the power structure. And so as they get closer to retirement, they get more and more centrist, wishy-washy, maybe even a little bit liberal, so that when they're done with office, they can be part of the in crowd in the lobbying community. Because all of this is about who are their peers. When they're at home campaigning, before they got in there, their peers were you and me. Now that they're there, their peers are other congressmen. Their peers are the liberal elitists down at the country club. Their peers are, at least in their minds, are the people at the local watering hole where they like to go after work on a Friday night, right? Their peers are the people at the bowling alley in that DC suburb where they go for recreation, or at, out on the links when they're golfing with their pals, people they think they're pals, or just their neighbors. They have a barbecue. Their neighbors are probably liberal. All those people they're interacting with are liberal, and they want to fit in with them. It's deep-seated and it's human. So in summary, this is why peer group shift. Nobody gets more conservative when they go to the seat of power. They either don't change, which good for them. They stay true to who they are. That's uncommon. More likely they drift to the center or even to the left. Nobody seems to ever shift to the right. They drift towards the center or the left because they're in a power center that embraces culturally, it's like a subculture, the leftist positions. Again, I am Doug with Tusk Consulting. TuskConsulting@gmail.com. TuskConsulting@gmail.com. And thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one.